Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Welcome back to Horror Analysis with me, Drew. How you doing? Oh, I'm very tired. But I have more stuff. I have the period between 1875 and 1899. 25 years back. I decided on 25. I was almost tempted to go 50, but that would have been a very, very long video. And I had more than one thing to play with in this video, so 25 it is. I have my hot water. We are, of course, talking about history of horror. 25 years before the 20th century. I'm going to start, as I have been, with the motion pictures. And we get to finish the motion pictures because after this 25-year period, or before this 25-year period, since we're going backwards, there weren't any. Certainly not of the horror stripe. I don't know when the exact first motion picture was, but I don't think it was before 1874 or 1875. Did I just drop something in my hot water? Oh no, I missed my hot water barely. That was sad. Anyway. Much better. So, the dawn of the motion picture. The beginning of the motion pictures. It's essentially the same list as I had last time. Once again, thanks to www.angelfire.com/darkside/realm of horror/historyofhorror1.htm. You've been very helpful to me in explaining, the history of motion pictures and horror motion pictures. Of course, these two IMDb lists. Thank you to whoever created these. And then underneath we have that Georges Méliès. He's going to be the director of most of the ones that we're talking about here. And since I can't pronounce his name, since he's French, I'm going to put it up on the screen. Georges Méliès. Alright, I'm just being silly now. I'm glad the camera wasn't on me when I was trying to pronounce that word. No, I'm not going to do it on camera. Forget it. Alright, so we're going to work backwards, of course, from 1899 to the first one, 1895. So we're only dealing with 4 years. And almost all these movies are a minute or so long. This was the period in which I talked about last time, where the lady director was the first director to break a 1 minute mark on a movie. Wasn't a horror movie, but she did horror stuff as well. And this is where, one of the first film edits is coming in. The first, lots of film edits. It's sort of like I think I said it last time as well. Horror seems to be, the force that pushes the Motion Picture Association along. I mean, it seems silly to say when we're talking about, hey, we broke a minute movie, when there's, 4-hour movies out there, or miniseries that are 10 hours or whatever. Or there's a film edit when Industrial Light and Magic can do ridiculous things, or what other studios? Jim Henson Studios, or many of the big studios that do crazy stuff. But they had to start somewhere, and it could really be said that, well, these guys, there wouldn't be an Industrial Light and Magic, or there wouldn't be Jim Henson Studios. Puppet things, I guess, would be around, but not in the same way. Oh, that's really hot stuff. Alright, so 1899, we had 2 movies by this guy, Georges. I'm going to call him Georges because it's a whole lot easier. One was based on an H. Rider Haggard book, She, which we're going to talk about in When we get to the book section, um, it's funny to say that a 1 minute video, 1 minute motion picture clip, is based on a book. It was called She, the Pillar of Fire. There was a book by H. Rider Haggard called She, and in it there was a pillar of fire that the woman bathed herself in to become quasi-immortal. And that's one of the weird fictions that, of course, Lovecraft is going to be talking about. Okay. Yeah. And so we'll talk about that in a bit. But it's just for the movie itself. Most of these you can just find. They're all public domain, obviously, since 1899. It's not like people are still under copyright. You can find these on YouTube pretty easily. So 1899 film or 1898 film or whatnot, you could just type that into YouTube and then put She or Georges Méliès. It's odd. It's good, but it's odd. Cleopatra's Tomb, another 1 minute movie by Georges. 1898. Cave of the Demons. Georges Méliès. Oh God, I'm not going to say it. I'm just saying Georges. Georges. Four heads are better than one. Georges Méliès. I'm not going to... whatever. My convictions, of course. Which apparently is a guy with four heads. Bewitched Inn. George... House of the Devil. Bewitched Inn was 1897. House of the Devil would be the first horror movie proper. Also, actually, I think this was much more than a minute. I think this was... It had to be. This was about 7 minutes long. House of the Devil. Also available on YouTube. Also, if you watched when I recommended the other guy who was helping me out, I don't think I have his info on here. 1 second, let me see if I can find it. Done. Nope. Nope. Why isn't it's coming up? Oh, yeah, it is. Here's one of them, anyway. If you watch this thing, the Josh Howard YouTube Philosophy of Horror presentation, he actually shows House of the Devil in full, which is 7 minutes of his presentation. So if you're interested, you could watch it there. I think you could just YouTube it yourself. But you probably, if you did watch through Josh Howard's, you've seen it, and it was actually pretty good. The last one, which was also shown on Josh Howard's thing, was the 1895, the first possible candidate for first horror movie, was The Execution of Mary, Queen of Scots. Also much less than a minute. One of the candidates for the first film edit. I'm not sure if it was the first one, but it was one of the first ones, certainly. Which showed an execution of Mary, Queen of Scots. Which is sort of for the, torture porn type thing. If horror is to be broadly defined, it would be the things where you just watch people being chopped up in odd ways. That's usually in the horror genre, even though they're usually not good. So the execution of Mary Queen of Scots was a man in a dress, dressed as Mary Queen of Scots. I guess they didn't have female actors then, or it just happened to be a man. walks up to the chopping block, kneels, puts his head down. The axeman raises his axe. The film cuts pretty seamlessly. You could watch it 3 times and then you catch it, but pretty seamlessly especially for 1895. The film cuts and a dummy is put in its place, and the axe comes down on the dummy, chopping off the dummy's head. The dummy looks like a dummy. You say, "Oh, I see how he did that." It's not the first snuff film ever. It's obviously a film edit. You could watch it twice and catch it, but it's well done for 1895, certainly. This is the only one on the list this time that isn't Georges. It's by a director called Alfred Clark. Yeah, I do actually. Oh, my stomach just started hurting. Probably because hot water hit the bottom of it. So now we're going to turn to the fiction side of things. That was essentially all the movies we had to talk about. Not too many. And most of them were Georges Méliès. I'm not good at it. Sorry. Yeah, so how am I going to start in books? Literature. So we're, of course, talking about supernatural literature and horror and literature. Shill by H.P. Lovecraft. And we're talking about several sections. We're still talking about the modern masters. One of the modern masters was writing during this 1875 to 1899 period. That's Arthur Machen. Then we have the weird tradition in America, the weird tradition in the British Isles, and then the chapters before Poe, the spectral literature on the continent, which has stuff that's after Poe into the late 19th century, and the aftermath of the horror fiction. Aftermath of... what is it called? Aftermath of Gothic fiction, of the Gothic. So 5 sections, which really, this is not as chronological as I once believed. I found that out the hard way this time and last time. Let's start with UK, and this is going to have most of the most famous ones. Arthur Machen, his modern HPL's modern master. The Great God Pan was written in 1894. That's probably one of his most famous works, besides The White People, which I talked about briefly last time, or maybe not so briefly. I talked about it last time. I finished reading it. It was quite good. I thought it could have been more, but it was quite good. But wrong button. Let's try that again. But The Great God Pan is probably his even more famous than The White People. The Three Impostors I've mentioned before, indirectly. I've mentioned the novel of the Black Seal during when I was talking about fission monsters, because the idiot boy slowly turning into a seal is part of novel of the Black Seal. And of course, it's very Lovecraftian in sense, because it's sort of a Lovecraft in Wales, like a character the character in the novel. Why do I keep hitting the wrong one? There we go. The novel of the Black Seal. The character in the novel of the Black Seal finds a town where something's going on with the townspeople. It's quite Lovecraftian. And there's hybrids of men and seals. Like in Shadow over Innsmouth, there was hybrids of men and fish in Lovecraft's one. So, very Lovecraftian in ideas. 2 more that are mentioned of this time. Innermost Light is 1895 and Shining Period is 1895. These two I don't know anything about. But if it's Arthur Machen, I'm sure it's good. So, Rudyard Kipling. I did mention Rudyard Kipling. Of course, he wrote into till his death, but his weird fiction was in this era. The two most famous, actually, Neil Gaiman has a book. I think it's Neil Gaiman. It might be S.C. Joshi. No, I think it's Neil Gaiman, or both. Have a book where they introduce the weird tales of Rudyard Kipling. No, I think it's Neil Gaiman. Neil Gaiman. But as I said, these are all things in the public domain, so you don't have to buy a book. You could probably just read them. Find out which books are. If you don't have the money to support Neil Gaiman or any of these guys, you can certainly research and find the stories included in the book and read them for yourself on Project Gutenberg, or listen to them for yourself on LibriVox.org. I know that The Mark of the Beast is definitely on LibriVox.org. I listened to it myself. The Phantom Rickshaw is too. I haven't listened to it myself yet. I think I downloaded it, but I haven't gotten to it yet. The amount of stuff that I have to read is huge. Lafcadio Hearn, we've talked about a few times briefly. He is going to be a lot of the basis for when I start talking about horror anthropology next section. He is an Irishman who went to Japan and started recording, what Japanese folklore and Japanese ghost stories were. Cool stuff, actually. The Kwaidan, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, was released, we talked about briefly, was released in 1904 or 1902, one of those two. Something along those lines. But he started earlier. In Ghostly Japan was 1899. Japanese Fairy Tales was 1898. Glimpses of Unfamiliar Japan was 1894. Not all those will be weird. One would think that In Ghostly Japan is weird. And he is one of the first translators of Japanese fairy tales, or Japanese horror tales into English. Matthew Phipps Scheel, one of the stories that Lovecraft mentions in Shill is Zaluka. It's 1896. Not one I'm familiar with. He also mentioned, I mentioned last time, the Flying Dutchman one, where there was a werewolf one. Oh shoot, I didn't write the page numbers on these things. Okay, so backing up, folks. Arthur Machen is page 88 in Shill. Rudyard Kipling and Lafcadio Hearn are both on page 76. Matthew Phipps Scheel is on page 77 with... Oh, I forgot to put Oscar Wilde down on here. Oscar Wilde wrote Picture of Dorian Gray in 1890. And of course, I missed this one entirely, didn't I? I did. Is it on my notes? No, I missed Oscar Wilde entirely. Oh. Oscar Wilde. Yeah, so actually Oscar Wilde wrote, also page 77, along with Zaluka and Matthew Phipps Scheel, also page 77. But Oscar Wilde wrote Picture of Dorian Gray. Not necessarily what I would call a weird tale, but it was an early horror, a turn of the century horror novel. There's a lot on, as you probably can tell, there's a lot on this list. The next one I'm going to be talking about is Dracula. Bram Stoker, that really needs very little introduction. It needs no introduction. I don't even have to describe it. It's a vampire novel. Do you guys not know that? It's the most famous vampire novel. Richard Marsh, The Beetle. Bram Stoker and Richard Marsh were both on page 78 for what it's worth. Richard Marsh, The Beetle. Was called a similar novel of horror by Lovecraft. Not exactly great praise, but anyway, nonetheless, Clemens Hausman wrote The Werewolf in 1896. I've read this one. It was one of the It was one of the ones that was included in one of the storybooks, and I'm a big werewolf fan, as I've probably mentioned 1,000, 2,000 times already. I didn't quite care for The Werewolf. I thought it was mediocre. Middle of the road quality werewolf story. But, middle of the road quality werewolf story couldn't, inspire somebody else's werewolf story, which is better. So, and then Lilith by George MacDonald was also on page 79. 79 got listy. Has a compelling bizarrerie all its own, the first and simpler of the two versions being perhaps more effective. Bizarrerie. Bizarrerie? Bizarrerie? I don't know that word. It's a cool word, though. HPL, of course, comes up with awesome word choice in his fiction as well as in his non-fiction. Alright. Oh, and not on this list is not what I would call a horror story, but Joseph Conrad, Heart of Darkness, which I think HPL praised for being atmospheric, if I know him. Oh, and this was he talks about it on page 85. Joseph Conrad, who often wrote of dark secrets within the sea and the demoniac driving power of fate, as influencing the lives of lonely and maniacally resolute men. That's what he has to say about Joseph Conrad. I think that's pretty accurate. Madness and demoniac driving power, resoluteness. Yeah, that's Conrad. And that's good stuff to have in horror. Let's see. What am I jumping back to now? I'll go through America pretty quick. Of course, another one of the big ones, of course, is Henry James' Turn of the Screw, Weird Tradition in America. Oh, where are my page numbers? 70 for Henry James, and F. Marion Crawford, actually. Henry James' Turn of the Screw we've mentioned several times. The Ghost Story, we've mentioned it in The Fantastic. I think we've mentioned it a few other times. We mentioned the film versions a few times. It's not a novel I enjoyed. I didn't particularly think it was well done. But other people have. Teach his own on that one. F. Marion Crawford. This is the guy who wrote the first Mafia book as well. And he's actually, hey, I can show this off now. Look what I got, guys. He was mentioned, F. Marion Crawford was mentioned in this. I got The Evolution of the Weird Tale by S.T. Joshi the other day, and I've been actually enjoying it quite a lot. I haven't gotten that far into it, and I just briefly read over. I read the first W.C. Morrow section and the intro, and then I flipped through the F. Marion Crawford section, which is helpful, actually. Thanks, ST. Appreciate it. You helped me in this. He praised pretty much F. Marion Crawford's work. The short stories, Upper Berth, 1886, and Dead Smile, 1899. Dead Smile, he said, was one of the scariest offerings in weird fiction or something along those lines. Oh, do I need exact quotes? Not really. Dead Smile is one of the most grippingly horrifying tales ever written. And Upper Berth was what S.T. Joshi called, and I apologize if it's Joshi or Joshi, I'm not sure. I'm guessing. Upper Berth he calls his best weird tale, F. Marion. What? Did I lose his name now? I did. F. Marion Crawford. I lost his name. His best weird tale. Other than that, he talks. S.E. Joshi actually mentioned the Joshi, whichever it is, mentioned the three novels that would count as part of his weird fiction: Zoroaster, Khaled, A Tale of the Arabia, and The Witch of Prague. Zoroaster being the quasi-bio. The main character is the character Zoroaster, who came up with Zoroastrianism, one of the religions of today. And of course, the certainly bordering on the supernatural things going on in those things. Khaled, A Tale of Arabia, is the story of a genie who gets turned mortal when Muhammad reads the Quran at him. And he has to convince a woman to fall in love with him so he can gain a soul, so that when he dies, he won't be soulless. That's weird, supernatural, fairy tale-ish, but dark fairy tale-ish. And then, of course, he actually falls in love with the girl he's supposed to convince to fall in love with him. And, stuff. But, cool stuff. And The Witch of Prague, I actually don't remember what I read about this one. Good job, Drew. And The Witch of Prague is another one that S.T. Joshi mentions. And that's my segue. Another big name, and another big story, Charlotte Perkins Gilman, 1892, wrote The Yellow Wallpaper. It's one of the ghost weird stories that is big in that time. This 1890s, 1880s to 1890s, we're getting into the beginnings of real 20th century horror. It's setting the stage. And, Bram Stoker and Turn of the Screw, we're not even setting the stage. We're there. It's the... I don't think, horror ever really goes away, actually, at this point. Going back. There's little dead areas. Next section might be a little bit light, but there's a lot of wars going on in the next section. In Europe, there was a Franco-Prussian War. In America, there was this American Civil War. So the next section, the 25 years from 1850 to 1875, 1874, will be lightish. And Ralph Adams Cram, The Dead Valley, 1895, is in Chill. Ralph Adams Cram, when I Wikipedia'd him, I got really confused because he's a very famous architect. But he did write, strangely, a collection of ghost stories, or a ghost story. What was it? Is it a collection or is it not a collection? Oh, and I forgot to give page numbers for these things again. Oh, sorry, Charlotte Perkins and Ralph Adams Cram are both on page 72, so we're golden. Yeah. The Dead Valley is his weird... I think 72. I think Lovecraft called him a medievalist? Yeah, he called him an eminent architect and medievalist. So... medieval? I don't know what that means in essence, so unfortunately I have to claim ignorance on that one. I hate doing it. I like giving you all the information where instead of giving lists. Once again, if you guys want to take any of these stories and do a little report on them yourself, on camera or with a screen up just talking about it, or even if, write a little review blurb, that'd be cool. Just, it's a homework assignment if you choose to accept it. I can't fail you, so. The next section back, the first pre-post section I guess we're getting into, spectral literature on the continent. There's Erckman and Chartrain wrote The Werewolf. They wrote it in 1859, so it really belongs in the next section, but it wasn't translated into English until 1876, so I don't know what section to put it in. I probably should put it in the next section. Oh, I'm calling it White Werewolf, but it's the Man Wolf. Oh, I screwed that one up. Good job, Drew. 49. Page 49. Did I really screw it up? Yes, I did. The Man Wolf, not the Werewolf. My apologies. Was 1859, translated into English in 1876. And then we get to Guy de Maupassant. And Guy de Maupassant I quite like, so I'm happy to talk about him for a bit of time. I got my Selected Tales of Guy de Maupassant. We have... wrong slide. Oh yeah, I couldn't figure out where when half these were written, by the way. The Horla was written in 1887, and I found out that Who Knows was written in 1890. The rest of these, I haven't been able to figure out, and these are the rest of these that Lovecraft mentions. And there are some other ones. If you go to Wikipedia and look up Guy de Maupassant, and you look at his list of short stories, it's huge. It's really, really large. These are, of course, selected tales, and there's only, 40 in here? Oh, they're not numbered. That doesn't help. Yeah, there's a lot in here, and there's a lot of other tales that aren't in there. Guy de Maupassant wrote a lot. The Horla is probably his most famous horror or weird or spectral work. I think it's got a fantastic element to it. You come away not knowing if the guy's just whacked. Um, you know, there's stuff going on. Diary of the Madman is like that too. Um, I don't know if I know. I know the Spectre. I've read the Spectre, and some of these are actually, you know, called different things in different places. So I'm not sure if the horror is the Terror, because I have the Terror in here as well. Um, and it's just a different translation. Um, there's a lot of these on LibriVox as well. They're available. Diary of a Madman was essentially that. He's talking about killing people, but and doing bad things, but we don't know if he really did or he's just nuts. On the River, today is the first time I've heard of it. The White Wolf, I don't know if it's written in my book here, but I don't know if I read it or not. I've never heard of either, so. But Guy de Maupassant, actually, I don't think Lovecraft gave him the credit I thought he was due, to be perfectly honest. Guy de Maupassant is mentioned on page 48. Oh, no, actually, he's quite complimentary to Guy de Maupassant. The horror tales of the powerful and cynical Guy de Maupassant, written as his final madness gradually overtook him, present individualities all of their own, being rather the morbid outpourings of a realistic mind in a pathological state than the healthy imaginative products of a vision naturally disposed towards fantasy and sensitive to the normal illusions of the unseen. Nevertheless, they are the keenest interest and poignancy, suggesting with marvelous force the eminence of nameless terrors. Yeah, this is actually very complimentary. Of these stories, the horror is generally regarded as the masterpiece. It generally is. What was this? It says that the Horla is indebted to Fitzjames O'Brien, which we're going to talk about next time, because I like Fitzjames O'Brien too. He creeps me out, which says something, being that it's well over about 150 years since he's died. So, was it? I could probably answer that question on my own. Died 1862. It was 151 years since he's died. And he still creeps me out. So there you go. So apparently he was indebted to Fitzjames O'Brien for the idea, sort of. Spectre, Diary of a Madman, The White Wolf on the River, and the Grizzly verses entitled Horror. I think I might have said The Horror on here, which might be wrong. I did. My apologies if I screwed that one up, but I can't find that one. It might be under The Terror, or that might be another story entirely. Guy de Maupassant has a lot of stories. The Wikipedia page has 3 columns, and it's like you have to scroll down to get them all in. It's pretty intense. There's a lot of stories on there. And he wrote, his earlier work was romancy, comedic, comedy of manners type stuff, and then he got dark I guess he went crazy. I don't really know his biography all that well. but I like his stories. So jumping back to the other one, but we're going to talk about. Oh no, I forgot the big chunk of America, and then I want to talk about too. So let's jump into that. Ambrose Bierce. Yeah. I like Ambrose Bierce a lot, as I've mentioned quite a few times. And this is a big period for him. So I gave him his own slide. 2 collections during this period, Can Such Things Be? And In the Midst of Life. Or that's what Lovecraft called it. Wikipedia called it Tales of Soldiers and Civilians. Either way, it's 1891, and that's where you get Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge. Probably one that most of you read in high school, or forced to read in high school. I didn't like it in high school. And compared to Ambrose Bierce's other work, I still don't like it, just best comparatively. I like it now. Leading me to conclude further that it's something I've already known, that the stuff that we force kids to read in high school, we shouldn't force kids to read in high school. They should be told about them and said, hey, you can read this if you like. You just probably won't get it. You won't appreciate this. Same with The Monkey's Paw. Same with, The Most Dangerous Game. Things you're forced to read in high school that are quasi-weird. They're just like, they don't do anything for you in high school. But Ambrose Bierce. So, Curtains of Gallows Creek Bridge. I like the movie version. The 1891. There's The Death of Halpern Fraser, 1893. I think Lovecraft. Oh, what am I talking about? What page numbers? Page numbers, Drew. Ambrose Bierce, page 66, basically through page 70. Yeah, he thinks probably Halpern Fraser's probably his favorite. And he mentioned Maupassant again. In Poe, one finds it a tour de force, in Maupassant a nervous engagement of the flagellated climax, to Bierce simply and sincerely diabolism held in its tormented depth, a legitimate and reliant means to an end. Fair assessment. Death of Halpern Fraser, it's one he talks about the most. He's kind of... He gets critical, which is fine. Even though I'm a big fan of Bierce, I don't mind criticism. Some of the criticism's fine. Means to an end sort of works. It does. Bierce, you get it. He's very cynical. You get that from his writing. So, Bierce is going to project stuff at you to get the reaction out of you. He's really good at it, though. I don't mind this because he's really good at it. If someone was, obviously manipulating me in other circumstances, I'd probably be angry. When Bierce does it, I don't seem to mind so much. I guess, I don't know, it's weird. I'm getting a little rambly. It's my Friday. I'm tired. The Damned Thing was on here as well. That was 1894. Suitable Surroundings was 1891. The middle two of The Right Foot, they give a good little synopsis of the plot. That was 1891. A man kills his family, his kids and his wife. His wife only had his wife lost the middle toe of her right foot before she died. He escapes and he comes back 10 years later. The townspeople lock him in the house where he committed the crime, threatening to have a knife fight. Someone threatens to have a knife fight with him in the house. But the guy doesn't show up. They just lock the murderer in his house, in the old house, and they find the murderer in the morning, scared to death, literally, with two sets of footprints from the kids' footprints leading up to him, but not leading away, where he's hunched in the corner, frightened and scared, and then one adult set of footprints with the middle finger of the right foot missing. So, or the middle toe of the right foot. Why do I keep saying finger? Why I keep hitting the wrong slides? Middle toe of the right foot missing. It's your standard ghost stories, I'm sure, but Bierce does them really well. The Spook House is the other one mentioned here, 1889. So, what does he say? Bierce seldom realizes the atmospheric possibilities of his themes as vividly as Poe, and much of his work contains a certain touch of the naivete, prosaic angularity, or early American provincialism, which contrasts somewhat with the efforts of later horror masters. Nevertheless, the genuineness and artistry of his dark intimations are always unmistakable, so that his greatness is in no danger of eclipse. As arranged in his definitely collected works, Bierce's weird tales occur in mainly 2 volumes, the 2 at the top here. That was page 69 and 70. He loves those big words, Lovecraft. So, and then we're down to our last slide in our last section. Going back even further, which was supposed to be before Poe, but Poe died in 1849. So, I don't know what... It's not chronological. The aftermath of the Gothic. So apparently, Lovecraft sees these works as being uninfluenced by Poe, or on a different stage. It's kind of weird. I don't know what the categorization tells about Lovecraft's thoughts on this one. But H. Rider Haggard, She, which we mentioned briefly in the we mentioned that one of the movies from this time was a adaptation of a scene from She. Obviously, a novel is not being done in a 1-minute movie. Lost World style of stories. H. Rider Haggard is well known for his Lost World style of stories. H. Rider Haggard wrote a lot about Africa, which was the Dark Continent. It was, at the time, not well known. So H. Rider Haggard made up, hey, when you go over this mountain, you find a whole lost world. This is stuff that's been adapted by other people. Not the Lost World as in dinosaurs, but Lost World where this civilization had different things going on. This was Land of the Dead? No, it's not Land of the Dead. Pardon. Robert E. Howard does one of these in one of his Solomon Kane stories, because Solomon Kane stories sometimes take place in Africa, where there's the Valley of the Dead, where there's you go through this valley and there's a bunch of vampires there in Africa, because you could, people didn't know about Africa. So you could say, make these things up. And so it's influencing a lot of things, this Lost World style of... Wrong slide. Lost World style of story. And of course, this was also adapted by Lovecraft, where R'lyeh is a lost world. It's in the Pacific. Pacific? Yeah, it's Pacific. An island that just raised up out of whatever and had the temple, the Cyclopean temple. Because in the dark South Pacific, you could have a missing island forever. Or in the dark continent of Antarctica, you could have a missing civilization type thing. Clark Ashton Smith had a lost continent in Arctic, where they worshipped Shoggoth. Is it Shoggoth? No, it wasn't. It was Avatar of... Oh, I can't remember. It was 3 videos ago, and I've done other videos in different areas since then, redoing them. Redoing the older videos when this thing. So I'm getting a little confused. But the Lost World style. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle wrote, his vampire tales he wrote from 1880s and 1890s. The Parasite was in 1894. That one I listened to on audiobook. It was pretty good. It was kind of creepy. A fair representation. Not a bad story. Ring of Thoth is another one. And Lot 249 was a sort of mummy story where a guy buys a mummy, Lot 249, in an auction, and then gets it to hurt people kill people that he doesn't like. The Arthur Conan Doyle is not one of my favorite horror writers. I quite like his mystery. I like Sherlock Holmes, but he's not this is not his strong suit. I'm glad that he joined us, and he of course was business partners with Bram Stoker. I think Bram Stoker was his literary agent or his theatrical agent. I think it was Bram Stoker was Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's theatrical agent. That's what it was. Before he wrote Dracula, and then he became Bram Stoker. Still the wrong slide. Come on, Drew. H.G. Wells. I actually like some of H.G. Wells' stuff. The Red Room, 1894, and The Strange Orchid, 1894, also were short stories that were kind of creepy. War of the Worlds deserves mention here, but I don't consider it to be horror. The Invisible Man really isn't horror either, though when it gets to be adapted into movies, it's usually in the horror genre. So it gets put in there. I'm still not getting there. I can't hit the right slides today. Sorry. Invisible Man, 1897. The Island of Dr. Moreau. Movie adaptations, horror. Book, nah. The book, the audiobook's available on LibriVox. It's the free audiobook. It's amateur reader, but it's good reading actually. But scary? No, it's not scary. Suspenseful? Yes. And I think in the 90s it was turned into a horror movie, and it was a horror movie. The Island of Dr. Moreau, where the man turns animals into people through cutting them up and reshaping their bones, breaking their bones until they walk like men. And somehow making them walk like men makes their brains like men. Which is creepy. Those scenes, the mad scientist scenes, the Overreacher, from the Overreacher plot. Definitely good stuff. But how horrific is it? The Red Room, ghost story, very, quite scary. Reasonably scary. Haunted room that's red, strangely enough. The Strange Orchid. This guy is obsessed with orchids. He gets his orchid seed from Africa through mysterious circumstances, and it grows and almost kills him. I guess you could see this is a preamble to Little Shop of Horrors, or an early influence on Little Shop of Horrors, which isn't necessarily horror either. Neither the Jack Nicholson version nor the Rick Moranis version, musical version. But, it's in the same genre. It's in the same category. It's related. If it's not horror, it's related. It's a cousin of horror. Still not the right slide. And then, of course, we go down to Robert Louis Stevenson's The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. This, of course, is one that we've talked about many, many, many times. Temporal Fission, the Werewolf Tarot card in King, etc., etc. We have some really heavy hitters in this section. From 1899 back to 1875, we have Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Invisible Man, War of the Worlds, Island of Dr. Moreau. She, if you know the genre, she pops up quite a few times. Not just this early adaptation of the scene of it, but it pops up in the 30s as well as one of the movies I think we talked about. Maybe it was the 40s, but I think it was the 30s. Ambrose Bierce, The Occurrence of Foul Creek Bridge, is in this area. Quite a few other ones. Guy de Maupassant, definitely the Horla, definitely part of the big, one of the heavy hitters of this, the horror tale. Great God Pan, Three Imposters, especially the novel The Black Seal. Phantom Rickshaw and Mark of the Beast, definitely in that heavy hitter section. And Dracula, huge. It's Dracula, for goodness sakes. And Turn of the Screw. And The Yellow Wallpaper. These are the big names. And there's a lot of other ones like the F. Marion Crawford that I want to check out now. Really want to check out now. I want to check them out for a while, to be honest. I've been listening to Poe, which will be a section after next. But I'm thinking F. Marion Crawford will be checked out pretty soon. Yeah, I want to check out this Man-Wolf too, because I'm a werewolf fiend, of course. So yeah, man, we're almost to an hour. This was a kind of scattered video, folks. But we're going to continue with History of Horror. We're going to go back another 25 years from 1850 to 1874. The pre-Poe years, I suppose. This is going to be a lighter area because of stuff that's going on in the world. We'll still have some stuff. We won't have the big names as much, but we'll have some things to talk about. Yeah. Pardon me. To a certain degree. So, that's for next time when we talk more about the history of horror. My name is Drew. Thanks for watching Horror Analysis. I'll talk to you guys next time. See you next time. Bye.